How you doing? It is Monday. Vince DeDario is back from vacation. Sean Stires. I've been here. I guess I was off for an extra day last week, but
That's true.
We are all here today. It is Monday, and it just hit 6:02, and we've already got people, chirping out there. Salty says, in a strange kind of synchrony. I don't know if you meant to say synchronicity, like he left out a couple syllables there or what, but he said HBO is showing the Fellowship of the Ring at 6 p.m. It's a Sean Astin nod to IB Sports Talk. Wonder if HBO will wait until 6:07 to start. That is just a severe jab, and I challenge you to find a show that we started at 6:07 last week. Come on.
Seriously, I don't think we ever start that late unless there's like some severe technical
Major
difficulties
stuff going on. That's right.
That's right. That's harsh. It's harsh.
Good vacation?
It was a very good vacation. It's never long enough. You know how vacations go. Like, it always felt like, we got there and we had 7 days or whatever. It's like, oh, we got so much time. We're going to get all this stuff done, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, we got a day and a half left. And we got this list of things still that we want to do. And so a bunch of stuff gets left off the list. It's the same story every year. You'd think we would learn our lesson, but we never do.
Salty says synchrony is used correct. I'll trust you on that one. I don't know if I've ever used synchrony, but I'll trust you. Okay. My vacation's coming up in a couple of weeks, so we'll see what we're able to jam in to ours. We don't have to take 16 kids with us though, so
yes, we had 5 kids plus 1, so it was a lot of kids that we were dealing with. So
yes,
it was fun. I'll tell you more about that off the air, but it was something that we've never done before, and I'm not sure I want to do it again, but it was fun. It was a good time.
All right. So we're going to save the actual Notre Dame football talk for rapid fire. We do have some Notre Dame football talk that we'll get to in rapid fire, but this is kind of a show that we've been talking about. You and I have been talking about doing this for a little bit. And this is the 30th. This year is the 30th anniversary of the movie Rudy coming out. Of course, Sean Astin, famous, Daniel Rudiger, all that stuff. Notre Dame oriented movie. They still show it. Like at Notre Dame. They've been showing it for the last few years on the big screen at Notre Dame Stadium.
I need to make it in for that one of these days. Like, I think that would actually be a lot of fun.
Do they allow the general public, or is it just students? Do you know?
That's a really good question. It may be just for students.
There's enough room for anybody who wants to show up, but I'm sure they keep it to students. But.
Yeah, because I know they do. They let the kids bring like their picnic blankets and the whole thing, and they're on the field, and that would because I don't know. I think I might have failed as a father. I don't know that I've ever actually forced all of my children to sit down and watch it. I know they would. Some of them would not enjoy it at all. But I don't know. I think I need to sit my kid down and make him watch it again with the eyes of a football player and that kind of a thing. But
I will have to ask Jesse tomorrow. I don't know that, we ever formally say I've got the DVD. And I watched it this weekend.
Yeah. With some technical difficulties.
Yeah. It's like, first I noticed when I put in the DVD, it's like, wow, when did my DVD player start sounding like the old projector we used to use in history class?
Well, go ahead.
Well, one of them wouldn't work at all. And so I swapped out, the DVD from the other room, to the room that I wanted to sit. I don't know if it's the cables or what, but I ended up watching Rudy in black and white. It's like, am I watching one for the gift, or am I watching Rudy? What are we doing here? But I was able to watch it, even though it was in black and white over the weekend. So it was a little bit different experience. Definitely an old school experience watching Rudy in black and white.
I was actually not able to watch it because it turns out I only have it in VHS. I never upgraded, quote unquote, upgraded to the DVD. And at some point along the way, I got rid of all my VHS. So I do have a VHS player, believe it or not, that I could have watched it on, but I couldn't find it anywhere, and I don't have it on DVD. So I'm going off the noggin here, and
I'm sure you'll remember it.
I feel pretty good about it because I'm pretty sure I could recite start to finish every line in the movie. So,
so we've been kicking this around. We knew this was the 30th anniversary. The actual anniversary is the middle of October when the movie was actually released. We're obviously going to be talking about some, football at that point. So we wanted to dedicate. Ooh, he's got the bell. We wanted to dedicate some time to it. It's July. This is what you do in July, and I'm like, it's Monday. Vince is coming back from vacation. Let's have a little fun on this Monday. Talking a little bit of Rudy. Here we are.
This is perfect. Yes. This is a topic that I am relatively passionate about as well. And you used to have a podcast where you guys would watch sports movies.
Right.
And when you guys did Rudy, I was appalled at the entire thing. And I had to come on. We did a second show where I was able to rebut a lot of the nonsense
the rebuttal. That's right.
I heard. Yeah.
That's right. And apparently it sounds like Ryan would be, DT says, can we get Ryan on for a guest opinion on the movie? Apparently
he is not a fan.
Not a fan of Rudy. And
not a fan.
I'll say I've gone back and forth, and I let our friend Bobby taint me, I think, last time, and I soured a little bit. Watching it this time, I'll say I came away with the better feel. I will say this.
Better.
Very slow first hour. Like that whole, like the lead up till he finally gets on the team and all that. It's maybe it's just because I've seen it so many times. Very slow. Very slow build up to get there.
Yeah, I guess I could see that, but a lot takes place in that first hour. I mean, he makes a best friend dies, he has a girlfriend, they're going to get married, that goes away. Like, there's a lot going on, man.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you're trying to build a story. I would have been curious to see what Roger Ebert thought of it. Roger Ebert loves the story. So
there was a lot of twists and turns. I mean, if you've never seen it before, we're talking death of a best friend. We're talking the death of a relationship and a brother's betrayal as well. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in that first out.
Jonathan says a lot of friends were in this film, like his extras, basically, kind of thing.
Well, earlier he said that one of the scenes was filmed in a classroom at John Adams High School. So my guess is he was in high school at the time.
Okay,
and therefore there was a ton of people that were in the. I know there was a ton of people in the stadium during that game. Obviously,
someone needs to do someone locally needs to do some kind of, better documentation of all the local spots that were used in Rudy. And you could almost make like a Rudy tour. Cause like I've been in, I can't even remember the name of the tavern. It's like one of those neighborhood taverns that they filmed, the bar scenes.
It's Corby's.
And, it wasn't. Well, Corby's was one, but there was another.
Oh, the one that's supposed to be more like in Chicago.
Yeah, it's on. Yeah, not Corby's where the students go.
Right.
But it's the one where he's supposed to be still in Chicago with Pete and his brother.
Right.
And I think his dad is there. That was actually it was filmed on the west side here in South Bend. I can't remember the name of it, but I have been there before a couple times, and it's just just a small kind of dive bar type place. And I've always wondered. Some of the other spots that they used, to shoot some different stuff. Someone, like I said, I think someone needs to do some better documentation here around town.
I'm
write a book about that or something.
I want to touch on that to a degree because there's a bunch of stuff that we're going to hit, right? You asked me some questions, and let me ask you location shoot is one of them.
You are a native of the area.
Yes.
You were what, like 11, 12 when this was being filmed?
Shot. Yeah, that sounds
so. Do you have a recollection of that? Like, do you remember hearing about, hey, they're shooting a movie about Notre Dame, something like that?
Not even an inkling, not even a remembrance in any way of that. Nope. No, because when I was growing up, Sean, South Bend, Mishawaka, like I grew up in Elkhart and Bristol, right, which is a little bit east of Elkhart. And when we would go to the mall in Mishawaka, like that was a thing. Like that was a to-do because
that was like the day trip, huh?
Yeah, because back then when you're traveling down Cleveland Road, there was nothing from like Cassopolis Street and Elkhart all the way to the mall, it was nothing but cornfields. So like that was a trip. So anything that was like happening in the South Bend, Mishawaka area, that was like another planet for me. So I don't remember this at all, to be honest with you. Not even a little bit.
Okay. Interesting. The first, like I remember seeing maybe kind of some, I didn't live here, obviously. I was in Lawrence, Kansas, still going to school. So the first I, really heard of it, I remember seeing some previews, but it wasn't really even clear that it was necessarily about Notre Dame. I don't remember that. And the first, I finally saw it when it was in a dollar theater.
Really?
And it was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I didn't realize exactly what this, this is a pretty cool movie. Do you remember, the first time you actually saw it?
Oh, I do. I saw it in the theaters. And I remember because I was 12 when it came out, and I remember going to see it in the theater, and it may have been the dollar theater now that you mention it. But I remember right where I was sitting in the theater. I was in like not the complete front, but front left. And that the opening credits where you just have the drums,
drum line,
like boom, boom, boom. Like I was hooked. I was in. I remember at the end, tears. Like the whole thing, man. Like I was hooked from the first note. There's no doubt.
Interesting. I guess that shouldn't come as a surprise because again, by then you're like what, 12 or 13 years old already, I guess, right?
Yep.
So like,
I was right in that gullible, like I'm in stage, you know what I mean? Because it came out in 93, right? So that was right in the like Notre Dame is really good, period. You know what I mean? It was that 92, 93 season.
True.
Like that's when I really kind of fell in love with Notre Dame in the first place.
And I think they
the
filmed
Bettis, Meyer, that whole thing.
And, yeah. Like you remember, the famous snow game with Penn State, Notre Dame and Penn State. I think they were actually there, and they shot like one. Remember, like there's a scene where it's snowing a little bit. They were actually there that day just for like that one scene, that they did. It's directed by David Anspaugh, written by Angelo Pizzo. Is it Pizzo or Puzo? Pizzo, I think.
I think it's Pizzo.
But they also collaborated to make the movie Hoosiers. And they did another sports movie a few years back called The Game of Their Lives. I haven't seen it. It's based on the 1950 U.S. soccer team. So they did, handful of movies together. But the two most famous ones probably, Rudy and Hoosiers, about 7 years apart, they did them. And like when you see Hoosiers, when you see Rudy, I think, again, like that slow buildup, I think that is a very common theme in the two because Hoosiers doesn't really get cooking either until the basketball comes and they go in the state tournament. Right? That's how I felt watching Rudy this weekend.
That's my biggest thing about Hoosiers is it's a slow mover, man. Like until they get into the tournament when you actually get to see some action, like definitely did not need the Gene Hackman love story. And like, there's just a lot of stuff about Hoosiers that didn't need to happen, but like the sports part of it is awesome for Hoosiers, So yeah,
see, that's how I felt about the start of Rudy.
And I get it
a little bit too much. It's like, all right, let's, especially like if you were doing it today, I think the pace for both of those movies would have to be a lot quicker. Just the way, people's attention spans and the way things are shot and cut and edited and everything else. Like, I don't know that you could make movies like Hoosiers and Rudy necessarily again, it's like, you'd almost have to like start with some kind of, sports montage or something, and then maybe slow down for a little bit and build back up again. Interesting though, that you remember Mary, the girl on campus who Rudy, she's the girl who was like running the activities and was in charge of the football helmet painting and all that stuff. Greta Lind, the actress, she married Pizzo. They were married from like 94 to 2010 before they divorced. But so she was in it and ended up married to the guy who wrote the film.
I didn't know that, but it pays to know who you know.
Research. I remember finding that when we did the first.
Did you go back to your notes? Did you go back to the archives?
I didn't, but there was something that I saw. I was looking something up and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that. So what do you think? Does this Does Rudy hold up over time? I mean, you're still in love with it sounds like.
Oh, I'm going to be one of the most biased people you could possibly talk to, but I think it does hold up because of when it was filmed. It holds up, right? I mean, I don't know that you would have a hard time doing a period piece at Notre Dame right now. And this kind of goes into I've seen some people talking in the chat.
Well, like the way you'd have to shoot it would be so different.
Yes.
You'd have to use a lot of CGI to recreate the stadium. Yeah.
It'd be like trying to recreate, the Coliseum in Gladiator. Like,
right.
It just nothing about Notre Dame's campus looks the way it did back then. And I made a note of this when I was going through my notes for this, and campus didn't really change a whole lot from the late 70s to the early 90s at Notre Dame.
It's like mid 90s on.
Mid 90s from then until now.
Yeah,
it's almost unrecognizable.
It was really right after they shot the movie, because the west side of the stadium where the press box used to be, and obviously there's a couple shots you can see the old press box, and I mean, just looking at that, it's like a high school press box by today's standards. But even outside of it, there was a like a wide shot from outside, and that was all. There's buildings over there now, and that was all like grass field still at that point.
Oh yeah, and the whole athletic complex really that's on the south side of campus now really wasn't there. I mean, there's so many things that are completely different about campus, is that you couldn't shoot that on campus now. You would have to go someplace else and pretend that it's Notre Dame. And come on, you can't pretend anything is Notre Dame, right? I mean, so I don't think you could make that movie right now. I don't think you could. And it's a classic underdog story. You know what I mean? And it works as a sports movie because it's an underdog story.
And that's why it holds up.
Right.
Because of the underdog thing.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. The rewatchability, though, to me, again, like I did find myself enjoying once they got to, he made the team and all that stuff, found myself enjoying that more than the last time I watched it, which was probably 3-4 years ago, something like that, when we talked about it on that podcast. Overall rewatchability, I'd say the max is maybe 5 times for me, and it's like it's just kind of, and I think that I get, again, between the slow first hour of the show and just kind of, it's like, you've got to listen to his dad and all that.
Oh, he's pontificating, Sean.
Oh, I know.
Great.
Let me ask you this. By the way, slow clap. When he goes back to practice. Where are you on the slow clap?
I hate the slow clap. I hate the slow clap. If there was anything that was not believable in that movie, it's the slow clap where he shows up in the middle of practice. It's not even close to believable. And as much as I love this movie, as much as I love it, and I will defend it until my dying day, I can't defend that particular scene. Can't defend it. We've all been on teams before. We've all seen that kid who's a plucky whatever. Not once did I ever feel the need to slow clap that kid or anybody else for that matter.
Hey, you showed up late.
There's no way. We would be making fun of him for showing up late.
All-American offensive lineman is slow clapping the
right. The slow clap thing was hard to stomach. I'm not gonna lie. I am not a fan of the slow clap.
I remember Brubaker, the Robert Redford movie from like late 70s, early, right around 1980-ish, maybe something like that. That was the first time I remember the slow clap. They gave Brubaker the slow clap at the end of the movie. The prisoners did when he was leaving. That's the first slow clap I remember. This is probably the second slow clap I remember. I don't need any more slow clap after that.
Slow clap is just that's hard to stomach. The slow clap, it feels like it's a punchline almost. Like that's what the slow clap is, and that's it doesn't work at all. I have no problem with them welcoming him back in the huddle, that kind of stuff. Like there's they like rub his head, because he's like this little guy, and the big guy like rubs at the top of his helmet, okay. But the slow clap, can't get on board with that.
Yeah. Jonathan, we'll get into some of the stuff that did and didn't happen. And I think that that's what really, do you want to just do it now, or do you want to talk a little bit about the cast?
We can go whatever order you want. I got
Let's
all the answers.
Let's talk about the cast a little bit first. You got Sean Astin, who really, like this and Lord of the Rings, probably became his two biggest things, although he was on Stranger Things for a season, the first season of Stranger Things a few years back. I won't spoil anything if you haven't seen it yet, but I guess he was Goonies as well.
He was. That was the first thing I remember him from.
Yeah, but he was also a machine gunner in Memphis Belle. You've seen Memphis Belle, right?
Great movie.
With Matthew Modine.
Yep, very underrated movie, Memphis Belle. Check it out, people.
For sure. And I think really kind of, how do I want to say this? Just like the two gems that ended up in this movie were like, one was a bit part. The other was a little bit bigger part. Jon Favreau, the sidekick, D-Bob.
Yep.
Jon Favreau right now is one of the biggest directors in Hollywood because of, all the, I don't know if it's Marvel. I don't know which ones he does.
Marvel. Because
he does the superhero movies.
Yeah, he did a lot of the...
I think he did Iron Man.
Iron Man. He did a bunch of Iron Mans, Yeah.
But this is only the third movie that he actually was in as an actor. He was also Eric the Clown, by the way, in Seinfeld. Do you remember the Eric the Clown episode in Seinfeld? That's the one where George, he's got a girlfriend and he goes to her kid's birthday party and they've hired, like a birthday party clown, and the apartment catches fire. And George, when the apartment catches fire, he like rushes out the door and leaves the girlfriend and all the kids.
That's hilarious.
There. But Jon Favreau was Eric the Clown in that. You never get to see his face, but you can tell by his voice. And he's
almost unrecognizable in Rudy as to what he ended up being and all of that. I mean, because he had to have put on 70, 80 pounds for that.
Right. And of course, Vince Vaughn, who plays Jamie O'Hara, this was just his second movie that he ever made. And these two meet on the set of Rudy. And like 3 or 4 years later, they do Swingers, little independent, but it's like what launches Favreau. Like he wrote it, directed it, the whole thing. And it launched Vince Vaughn to a large extent as well. Because really, have you seen Swingers?
A long time ago, but yes.
Talking a lot with my hands right now. But
I have, but it was a long time ago.
Vince Vaughn, Trent in Swingers, like really that guy, which a lot of people say is just Vince Vaughn, but that became like his most successful comedies of the early 2000s were all basically that guy, right? Like
true.
The fast talking, quick-witted, smart aleck and all that.
Wedding Crashers,
Dodgeball,
all of those. Yeah.
But they met on the set, and again, like Vince Vaughn as Jamie O'Hara didn't necessarily have a big role,
and again, talk about unrecognizable. Most people, if they watch Rudy for the first time, would have zero clue that's Vince Vaughn,
right?
Unless they're looking at the credits, and I believe it says Vincent Vaughn as well. It doesn't even say Vince; it's Vincent Vaughn. They'd have no idea. They would have no idea that was him.
Right. Ned Beatty is the dad. Charles S. Dutton plays Fortune. Lily Taylor, who I still remember. Lily Taylor, I remember her for Lloyd Dobler's friend in Say Anything. She was the girl with the guitar and singing, what was it? Joe Lies When He Cries and all that stuff. And then you've got Chelsea Ross, who played Dan Devine, who again, like he was Mr. Sports Movies in the late 80s, early 90s. He also did the Anspaugh Pizzo movie. He was in Hoosiers. He was the assistant coach who I think was a dad that
he was basically a villain in Hoosiers.
He thought he was running the show and coach kicked him out.
Kicked him out of practice.
Kind of stuff. Yeah, that's right. But he was also Eddie in Major League, the pitcher with the grease ball and all that.
Oh yeah, he was the junk baller.
Yeah, he had a good sports movie run there.
He really did
in that time. And then I'll tell you what, I did not know much about Tom Denon, like the play-by-play voice that I knew and, was around for a long time. And I know that you knew Tony Roberts. And I always kind of wondered, well, why didn't they use Tony Roberts? Well, Tom Denon was before Tony Roberts, the longtime radio voice of the Fighting Irish, sports director at WNDU TV here in town, and hosted Ara Parsegan, Dan Devine, Digger Phelps coaches shows. He was the radio guy.
I didn't know that.
So they did use, again, research. They did use the actual radio guy. So that's good.
Well, and he sounded like a radio guy, to be honest with you. I mean,
right.
I realized he was reading lines or whatever, but he sounded like a legit radio guy. And that's not an easy thing. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's not an easy thing to do. Like, he sounded like a radio guy where he would kind of describe the action in between plays. And that's why he was talking about the chant that was going on. And he had the research as to, it was in the student newspaper and, like,
right.
That's a radio guy. Like, he sounded like a radio guy. I give him credit for that.
Yep. Father Hesburgh and Edmund Joyce both played priests.
I did know that
as well. Just a couple quick notes on some of these characters. Okay. Pete, great friend, right? Like, bought Rudy the jacket, encouraged Rudy, sucked, obviously, that he died. But Pete was a great friend. Like, Rudy needed a great friend, and Pete was a great friend.
He got one.
Yeah. Mary, who we were talking about on campus. Tough hang, Mary. Stickler for the rules with the whole, you got to have the ID. You can't paint the helmets without the A.
You can't blame her.
Tough hang, though. Tough hang.
Yeah. And did you ever, as you were watching the movie, were hoping that they would get together? Like,
it seemed like it was going to happen.
It never did. I mean,
it never did. You're right. Maybe Angelo Pizzo, was too jealous to let him kiss on camera or something.
I mean, the whole the last time you saw her was when she's at practice and he's like, don't I know you or whatever I can't remember exactly what he said, but oh my gosh, that's the guy that I kicked out. Oh, but that's it. They just dropped it. There was nothing. Like, Rudy was not lucky in love in this movie in any way.
Right. Not at all. Excuse me. Frank, Rudy's brother, not a lot of fun at parties, not fun at the bar.
Frank had something stuck up his butt, man. Like, he was just not a happy guy.
Didn't fall far from the tree, though, because Ned Beatty, as the dad, was, tough school, old love. Until Rudy proved that he was on the team and Dad showed up and saw it, like, Dad was Daddy Downer, basically.
That's true.
Not a lot of encouragement on the whole front.
Yes and no. I mean, he was trying to keep his son realistic. And we're going to talk about favorite scenes, and I will elaborate at that point.
Okay. I just feel like if they make this movie today and the dad is going to have that attitude, you're going to see mom swooping in, trying to pep Rudy up, give him some encouragement.
It would have been more of a positive influence. He had nobody doing that for him, by the way.
Except for Pete.
But then Pete died.
Right. I'm just saying.
He just had Pete's memory, basically. Right.
Pete was the closest thing because then the girlfriend, she's like, come on, let's buy the house and, all that stuff. And he's like, I'm not so sure on the house. There's kind of some things that I want to do. I'm 19, by the way,
right.
But yeah, I feel like that first hour, where it's all everybody just beating Rudy down.
There's a lot of activity.
The way they make movies today, the mom would be a much more prominent character, at least trying to prop Rudy up. And, maybe even the girlfriend, gives him encouragement instead of trying to tie him down. I don't know. Everything was weighing Rudy down except for Pete in that first hour.
No, that's true. And she was she was weighing him down, I guess. She was trying to get him to, get married and start a family and, just be like everybody else in town. They were going to get that cookie cutter house, with wall-to-wall carpeting and all of the, highlights that house had. And they nailed it with, I bet you they probably found that house on the west side of South Bend or something like that. But they nailed it as far as the cookie cutter houses of that era. I mean, that was right up the alley, man. Like I said, probably the west side of South Bend. They didn't have to go far because there's a bunch of those out there, but they nailed that one.
Salty is asking, when do you think Mary would have insisted that Sports Talk starts? I'm doubting Mary would stand for IB Nation Sports Talk starting much more than 10 seconds after 6 o'clock. There better still be zeros on the clock in Mary's world.
Mary's a stickler. Right. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if I would have let her into practice.
So one of the questions that we used to ask on the old podcast was, what role could Kevin Costner have played in this movie? Now, if you're doing it filming it in 92 versus now, you can do either one.
Well, basically. And it's tough because obviously if you were doing it now, he'd be a great dad, or he
especially
would be
like current Kevin Costner seems a little bit more dour.
Absolutely.
You know?
He could definitely be the dad working in the steel mill, like the whole thing. The problem with Kevin Costner when this movie was shot is that he was like in his late 30s. There's really no demographic. Yeah, there's no demographic for him because there's either the young people that are Rudy's age. And I looked up the ages of like Dan Devine and Ara Parsi. Like they were too old to have been played by Kevin Costner because they were in like their late 50s. You know, that kind of, he can't play. He's 37. He can't play 58. Like that. That's not going to work. So at the time this was made, I don't know that there was a part for him, like a legitimate lead-ish type of role. I mean, he can't play Fortune for obvious reasons.
Right. Well, now Fortune was actually like a composite, apparently, of multiple people.
So maybe he could have done that. I mean, that's a possibility, I suppose.
But yeah, I mean, they worked in, you know, a couple different angles by having, you know, Fortune be in there. Charles S. Dutton, we didn't even mention him, who was Rock back in those days. ROC. Did you ever watch Rock? No. Back in your preteen days?
No, I didn't. I don't even know what you're talking about.
It was a sitcom, Rock.
Really?
Yeah.
Thought I was pretty privy on all that stuff.
Lasted for a year or two, I think. Didn't last. I thought it lasted longer than it did, but it's the guy that was in not Lethal Weapon, but Die Hard. Remember the cop in Die Hard? He had a sitcom too, and I always get the two of those guys confused because you know, I think they both had more hair at one point.
Fair.
And neither of them have as much hair now.
That's fair.
Any other like would you have changed any of the casting for any?
You know, it's so hard when you find a movie that you love. Like it's hard to see different people, like different actors in those roles. You know what I mean? Like it's very, very difficult. I mean. It feels like a perfectly cast movie, Sean. So I don't know that I could actually fill anybody else in those roles, man. I'm sorry.
I think Vince Vaughn would have made an interesting D-Bob. I mean, it would have changed it a little bit, but you know, like a little wisecracking kind of guy. But I think the problem with that, I think the problem with that is then, you know, and at the same time, the running back could have actually looked a little bit more like a running back and been more athletic.
As opposed to like 6'4", 170 pounds.
He looked more like a quarterback than a running
back. Or a wide receiver. Like he looked more like a wide receiver than the kid who was supposed to lead the, you know, the All-American act like it. Like he looked more like a wide receiver than that kid did, you know.
Right. Yeah. And then
Rolling Steel.
So if Vince Vaughn is D-Bob, and then there's really no place for Favreau, which means they're not on the movie together, which kind of changes movie history for like the next 10 to 15 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, there's really none that I would probably change either. And I know, like you did an interview, you guys on the radio last year. You did an interview with Rudy, and I remember listening to that interview. There were a lot of different guys, I think, who were, you know, supposed to come in to audition to play the part of Rudy. But if I remember hearing that interview right, he said as soon as Sean Astin walked in, he knew that he was the guy.
Yeah, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, when you figure, because there has to be a certain body type, right? I mean, he's got to be small. You know, he's got to look like
basically he's got to be about our height.
I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, I don't know how tall Sean Astin is, but he can't be much. He's got to be about what we are, right? I mean, he has to be. Yeah. So there has to be, like, for example, Vince Vaughn couldn't have been Rudy. He can't be 6'4".
Great point.
And be Rudy, right? So he fit the visual of what we all now know of as Rudy. He fit that perfectly.
See, like Tom Cruise could have been Rudy like 15 years earlier.
I don't know. Do you ever look at Tom Cruise and think, downtrodden steel mill?
That's very true. Well, like in All the Right Moves. Have you seen All the Right Moves?
Oh my gosh, that's a great movie. I actually,
I mean, he was from a Pennsylvania steel town.
That's true. That is
true. But he still looked like Tom Cruise. Like he was
was
like the jock. He wasn't, like you said, he wasn't
Yeah, he looks at least athletic. He looks athletic. I don't know how athletic Tom Cruise actually is. I know he does his own stunts. But yeah, I've seen Tom Cruise run. It's like, I don't know. Is he really an athlete? Just saying.
That's very true.
I'm not trying to throw Tom Cruise under the bus during a Rudy breakdown.
Is like he likes to run in every movie possible, but he, at the same time, he looks like a guy who taught himself to run.
Yes. Right?
like he had to teach himself to run over the years, but he thinks that he needs to be running in every movie that he does.
Yes. He just runs very awkwardly. Very awkwardly, you know.
Tommy says he could have played Rudy. Anthony says Sean Astin is 5'6".
There you go.
To
so I tower over Sean Astin, is what you're saying.
Right. Right.
5'8".
I don't. Okay, so this is the part. This is where we kind of had our biggest disagreement when this is the reason Vince came in for the rebuttal the first time we did the podcast a few years back when we talked about Rudy. Anything that bugs you about it, and tell me what bugs you first, and then we'll get to, if there's anything that bugs you first, then we'll get into the bigger picture stuff. Because really, if there is a knock on this movie, again, we'll get to that here in just a second.
Yeah.
Anything that bugs you personally?
My biggest gripe, and it wasn't a gripe to begin with. It became a gripe as I went to college and whatnot. So my biggest gripe was that they didn't actually use Holy Cross in the movie. And when I was a kid, I had no idea that was the case. None. No idea.
What did they use for Holy Cross? Because I saw some of the cutaways. What were they actually using?
So that's like a retreat center that's right across the lake there. I actually went there in high school for a retreat one time.
I don't go to Holy Cross. I've been there a handful of times, but I haven't been there enough to know exactly, like what any of the buildings look like.
Right. So funny story, and this is going to sound pathetic, possibly. When I went to Holy Cross after high school, that's where I went for my first 2 years of college. And like one of the first things I tried to do when I went there for a visit, and I was looking for all the places where they filmed Rudy. I couldn't find any of them because they didn't exist. And it broke my heart, man. Like, it was totally not at all what I thought it was. And it ruined a little bit of the mystique for me. Because, of course, when I was that age, I had like visions of going to Holy Cross, transferring to Notre Dame. Like, I was on the Rudy path, Sean Stires. And I wanted to open my letter of acceptance on that bench and then run down and run. Holy Cross isn't on a lake. It's across the street. Like, it's not even.
Coach Davey, my name is Vince.
Seriously.
I'm all about ball, boy.
So, yeah, that was my biggest gripe, is that like I was walking through the hallways of Holy Cross, like looking for where they filmed stuff. Did not occur. Like,
Didn't exist.
They were not over there at all.
See, that's what, like, if they film that classroom scene at John Adams High School, maybe they have a plaque in there. I don't know. They need to have a plaque in there that says, like, the scene from Rudy was shot in this room, like. So
I taught at John Adams. I coached football at John Adams. I need to rewatch the movie and like focus a little bit more to see if it's John Adams. Like, that blows my mind. I think Jonathan is the one that told us that. That my mind is absolutely blown for that one.
Right. So my biggest gripe about the movie Rudy is this. I get it. It's a story of an underdog, and we're supposed to know, like, he's an undersized guy, a lot of heart, made it with Notre Dame. Okay. I counted 10 references to Rudy being the guy with the big heart, and literally 9 of them came in the last 45 minutes of the show. They bombard you with it in the last half of the show. And that's always been one of my biggest gripes. And I sat there with a notepad, and I was, going to keep track of it. And it's like, there was like one in the first hour, and I'm like, am I misremembering this? Did they not pour it on? And then all of a sudden he makes the team, and it's like, oh, boom, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. Literally. They beat you over the head with it. You could take about half as many, like make it 5. We don't need 10 references to you've got the biggest heart. And, that's what bugs me, especially on the rewatch. Again, like the first couple times, it's like, oh, kid has heart and whatever. Trying to watch it again, it's a little bit too much for me. And I've always compared it like to Rocky, movie you don't like, but Rocky, the reluctant hero, we don't get it beaten over our head that Rocky isn't, it's another underdog story, but they don't beat us over the head with the fact that Rocky's got all this heart and all this stuff, which to me is like kind of saying something, considering Sylvester Stallone obviously wrote it, and like time has shown that he's one of the biggest egomaniacs that's out there.
True.
But Sylvester Stallone didn't hit us over the head with it. Okay, so let's just get to what probably the biggest gripe that most people have. First, thanks for the super chat, Anthony. We definitely appreciate that always. Patrick, my gripe was making Dan Devine an antagonist. You're not alone in that. There's a couple more comments in here. Mr. 2.0, my gripe about the movie is that it didn't do Dan Devine fair. And Reverend JMH, was saying earlier, the names on the back of the jerseys in the coaches.
Well, the names were on the back of the jerseys back then.
I think they were.
So that's not that much of a stretch.
Right. But it's the fact versus fiction that I think gets most people.
Sure.
And specifically the Dan Devine stuff, like the scene, the office scene with the jerseys didn't happen. And the stuff on the sideline where he's keeping Rudy out of the game didn't happen. Dan Devine was not happy about it. That's where, a lot of people, like Joe Montana has not been happy about it. He's been vocal about it over the years. People locally, like Jeff Jeffers, if you ever talked to him back in the day, he was around. Let's see. Basically, a lot of people took issue with the fact that they took liberties with the truth. So where do you stand on that?
So any movie, and I do mean this as seriously as I could possibly make it, any movie that's based on a real story, that's based on real life,
there's going to be made up things.
It's not a documentary. So you have to go into a movie like this knowing that every conversation that's on the screen, every scene that happens may not have happened, and I don't really have a huge issue with that. I don't. There are documentaries out there about Rudy that are probably way more accurate than the actual movie itself. And I that's cool. I like the movie. I don't look at it, even though I was disappointed that they didn't use Holy Cross and all that stuff. I look at it as a movie that's entertaining, and it was entertaining to me, and it made me root for the underdog. That's the whole point of the movie. It's a feel-good movie, and I felt real good when that movie was over. So the fact that they played fast and loose with some of the details, I mean, it is what it is.
To make it a good movie, you have to have those antagonists.
Absolutely, you have to.
There has to be, some push and pull there. Like that's basically what it comes down to. Hollywood is always going to Hollywoodize things.
Right.
They've got to juice up the story a little bit.
To.
And a lot of people want to specifically blame like Rudy Rudiger, like Daniel Rudiger for this whole thing.
Right.
I doubt, because again, like he gave them the story.
He shopped his story to
he shopped his story, but there was an actual, and we talked about him, Pizzo, the guy who also wrote Hoosiers is the guy who actually wrote the screenplay. And if you want it to be a good movie, it can't all be just what happened. That's why sometimes you have to, make up a character, or like in the case of Fortune, you have to make a composite of you couldn't have like 6 different people, doing different things. You centralize it by, making like no one complains about the fact that Fortune was a composite character. You just complain about the fact that people, Dan Devine complained because they made him out to be a bad guy. And it's like, was Dan Devine's reputation really that damaged by this whole thing? Because, like there was there was a little tug of war with a walk-on back in the 1970s that nobody knew
I'm
about
pretty sure
for 15 years.
He still won a national championship. He still has a statue up at the University of Notre Dame.
Well,
I'm sorry.
And the other thing, and again, I know you asked Rudy specifically about this. He was in the Navy, and that is not mentioned in the movie at all. And like today, if they made Rudy today, I guarantee you, the Navy over the steel mill would be a much bigger thing. They would
make a point.
They would definitely play
absolutely.
Up the Navy part.
And I think that's disappointing, to be honest with you. I think that having him serve his country and all of that, I think that was a missed opportunity in Rudy. Right. So like, if there was something that I would add in or something I would change about the movie, that is one of the things that I would change. I would at least touch on the fact that he was in the Navy, right? Because he went to the Navy, he worked at the steel mill. Like, we're talking about a pretty good chunk of time between the end of high school and the time that he went to college.
Right.
And they don't really, like, they kind of joke around about it a little bit as far as, like, that he's a little bit older, but they don't really hit that very hard. And I feel like
there's also some money in his pocket as a result of his, he would have had a GI Bill. Like,
absolutely.
Like how they play up the whole fact that he's got to sleep in the, the janitor's room and all that different kind of stuff. He would have actually had at least some cash flow coming in. He wouldn't have been quite as broke as they made him out to be. So they definitely played that up as well. I'm not saying he was, like overflowing with money, but again, because he was in the service, and he would have had GI Bill coming back. So
right. Absolutely.
He would have had that working.
Yeah, I think they should have touched on that. And they should have played up the fact that he was a lot older than a lot of those guys that were on the team and all of that as well, because that's a thing.
Really, like, when you look at Sean Astin, you look at those other guys, they probably would have called him grandpa for that matter.
Right. And I mean, I guess he would have been like a sophomore, or maybe a junior. I don't know. When he was hitting on Mary, like, is he robbing the cradle? Like, what was the age difference there? I think I need to know this.
That's true. Very true. Let's see some other stuff that was now, I don't know if this is completely factual, but Sean Stewart said Rudy was in Vietnam when Pete died. He very well could have been. Because again, he was.
You're talking mid-70s probably. I mean, if I'm getting my timeline right. So I mean, that would make sense.
Right. Exactly. So where do you put it among your favorite sports movies, Vince?
It's top 3 for sure, if not 1 or 2. Like, it probably varies here and there as my mood shifts. But it's top 3. I mean, there are very few movies where, and I can recite this thing from start to finish as it's going along, like that annoying guy. And so it's always going to be one of my absolute favorites, one of my absolute bests, and nothing will ever change that. Like, it is absolutely one of my favorite sports movies of all time. The fact that it has to do with Notre Dame definitely vaulted it up there and probably was the reason that I went and saw it in the first place. So the tie-in absolutely is important, but I think the story and the underdog and all of it, it's just a great movie.
I put it top 10. I can't put it top 5. There are a lot of others that I would put up, between Field of Dreams, Bull Durham, those kind of movies. Friday Night Lights, the movie, like quite a bit. So I'd put it top 10, probably just outside the top 5. DT asked if I think it's because I didn't grow up with the film in my youth that it lost some magic for you. Maybe, because still fairly attached to like the Bad News Bears and the Bad News Bears and Breaking Training. Like, those are the ones. I would have been a little bit younger than you were when Rudy came, I would have probably been, maybe around the same 10, 11, 12-year-old range. Like when those came out, there's definitely some nostalgia with those. But at the same time, again, it's a good movie. It just, I think part of it is just, there's a little bit too much saccharine for me. That's what it comes down to.
I will say, I think DT's onto something here, because I saw this movie when I was 12 years old, almost the exact same time I was falling in love with Notre Dame football. Right. And I think part of that is because of this movie. I'll be real honest with you. I think it all goes part and parcel. You don't have one without the other for me. And so it is part of my youth. It is part of, again, my parents were not sports people. Like, I had to find my sports allegiances on my own. You know what I mean? Now, my mom's side of the family is from Chicago, so that's where I started following the Cubs and the Bears. But like Notre Dame football, I had to find that kind of on my own, right? 11, 12 years old, like that's when I was going in head first, and that's when this movie came out, and it probably sealed the deal for me. So that is part of it. I guarantee it. It's part of it with the youthful magic and all of that. Like, I was in on this movie when I was 12 years old.
Right. And that's, I really like it didn't, again, like when it comes to like the teams of my youth, it is still more Dallas Cowboys, Kansas City Royals than even Notre Dame. Like the Notre Dame stuff came, because again, growing up in the 70s, it's not like it is today where you're saturated with everything. And we had we had 3 channels. We lived, a little bit out of town, so we didn't have cable and all that kind of stuff. Like most of the Notre Dame stuff came from like my grandpa being, Irish Catholic, and like hearing him talk about it, but we didn't really even get to see it, not nearly as much as like Royals and Cowboys, which were on TV all the time, and they were both really good. So it wasn't really even until, like that early teen era where Notre Dame really started to come on the radar.
Yeah.
So like those other things, again, like my, like attachment to the Cowboys and all that kind of stuff. That's, I think, why it's so intense, just because it was more attached to my youth and all that kind of
Absolutely.
stuff. So,
that stuff you would get attached to in your youth. Like the Cubs for me was something I got attached to in my youth, right? I never really got attached to the Bears. So I could take or leave the Bears. Yeah, they're my NFL team, but I could take or leave them. They won the Super Bowl when I was 4. You know what I mean? But like the Cubs, they're on every day. And I watched them on WGN. My grandma was a huge fan. She used to buy me baseball cards. So it's like, it's that youthful attachment. I completely agree with you. And that's why I like, when I couldn't find Rudy yesterday, when I was going through my stuff, I found my synopsis of the World Series from 2016, narrated by Vince Vaughn. I watched that instead, and I was watching like I didn't know what was going to happen. Like I was totally in, But it's because of that youthful attachment. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. All right. So before we wrap up this whole discussion here, any favorite lines or scenes that you have from the movie?
Well, of course, there's the this is the most beautiful thing these eyes have ever seen when the dad walks into the stadium.
Right.
I get that, right? Where I'm totally jaded by that, being in there as much as I am. And I'll be honest with you, the scene / quote that the dad gives Rudy at the bus stop, I don't have a problem. I think that that's a great scene because he talks about the cows.
One basically like go ahead.
Yeah, he talks about the cows and how, he was a dreamer and all these things. And it's okay to have dreams, but it's also okay to understand what your reality is. I think that's a talk that parents have to have with their kids at times. Like if you walk into my middle school social studies class when I was teaching and you said, raise your hand if you think you're going to go to the NBA, every boy was like, what? Eventually, you've got to have that talk about reality. And that's what dads are supposed to do at some point.
I get that. But, again, especially because they skipped the Navy part of things, he was still supposed to be pretty young at that point. And like youth is for figuring out, how your dreams and reality, I guess, can actually intersect. Still, like, I would not discourage my kid from pursuing whatever dream they had. Maybe that meant they were going to run into a complete brick wall, and they were, at that point, you've got to face a different reality. But I wouldn't discourage them from at least pursuing whatever they think their dream is, as long as it's realistic. Because
that's
like
the thing.
You said, the NBA part or the NFL part, obviously for 99.9% of people, it's completely unrealistic. But something like this, I mean, He just wanted to get into Notre Dame and walk on and be a part of the team. Now, was that a long shot? Of course it was. But it wasn't a completely like because they also make it out, like they only lived in Joliet. He's only a couple hours, but he might as well have been, a world away from Notre Dame.
And that's why that was like that. It was his NFL, right?
Right.
And he was an average student at best in high school. They made that point very clear, right? And so when you look at it, like if my kid was a C student and he graduated from high school and we're at the graduation party, he's like, Dad, I'm going to Notre Dame. I'm like, sit down, son. We got to have a talk. Like, that's clearly not going to happen. Like, we need to have this chat. Like, you have C's. You need to have straight A's to go to Notre Dame. Like, that's a realistic talk that I think you got to have with your kid. He defied the odds. Obviously, he did a lot of things. And somebody said that they heard that Rudy was not a nice guy or whatever. I spoke with some of the professors when I was at Holy Cross. There was a couple of professors that were still there that were there when Rudy was there. And they basically just said he was really annoying because he would ask for extra credit all the time. He would ask questions all the time. Like, he was incredibly annoying. He wasn't a bad guy, but he was incredibly annoying in class.
But that is one of the things that you hear about him, is that he was, kind of a gnat, but at the same time,
but
he was single-minded. He had a goal. He was at Holy Cross because he wanted to get at Notre Dame.
Right.
And like, I think you would have been doing the same thing, Vince, quite honestly.
I kicked myself because I ended up getting really good grades at Holy Cross, and I decided not to apply to Notre Dame. I think I probably could have gotten in with the grades that I had. And it's because I was very single-minded there for a while. You know what I mean? And so I actually kicked myself to this day about that. Now, my life would have been completely different, but yeah, he was very single-minded. That's what he wanted to do. You know what? Yeah, he probably was very annoying, but he got what he wanted in the end. So
exactly. One of my favorite scenes is honestly the jersey scene. Whether or not it actually happened, I don't care.
Doesn't matter.
It's still a good scene.
It's powerful.
And him getting in at the end of the game, actually reaching, that's like, I will say this, as much as I've sit here and kind of like, too much Schmaltz, I did get a little, I felt a little emotion watching that final scene when he got in yesterday. So that, and like when the dad gets in the stadium for the first time, this is the most beautiful sight these eyes have ever seen. I actually, in the cover letter, when I first came here, when I first got the job doing, Notre Dame radio, and I mean, literally came from the cattle fields of Western Colorado. I used that line in the cover letter, that I ended up getting the job to move out here.
See,
so, yeah,
you can thank Rudy for that.
It's an effective line. That's right.
Look, every time he runs onto the field, onto the kickoff team, every single time I get chills. Every time. That to me, that is one of the markers of a good movie. Is if I've seen it 100 times and I still get chills.
And I don't know about you, my sophomore year in high school, the first varsity game I got into, it was the same, not exact same situation, but it's like a garbage time situation.
Yep.
They threw some reserves on the field at the end of the game. And it was like the same thing. I'm looking to the sideline. It's like, what do I do? Where do I line? All this different stuff. All these things are going through, it's like all those things. It was basically exactly the same. But obviously he was on a much bigger stage at Notre Dame Stadium.
Of course. But no, you're absolutely right. Like, it's under the lights for the first time, the whole thing. No doubt about it.
Yep. All right. Well, we will wrap up this part of the show. Had fun talking about Rudy. Again, 30th anniversary.
Crazy.
Of Rudy. Anything else before we wrap up? Like, you want to just?
I will say right now, it cannot be remade. You can't do it. I agree. It's just a classic movie. You cannot remake for the reasons that it's a good movie. That's one reason. The other reason is a practicality reason. Notre Dame doesn't look anything like it looked in the 70s. Like, where would you film? Like, where would you film? You would have to film on a sound stage with a green screen to make it look like Notre Dame Stadium looked in the 70s. You were still able to do that in 1992.
You don't have the RVs and all that stuff out there anymore, or not Like, I don't know if they have them on the white field or what, but
I
they
think
don't
that's
have
where
them
they are,
anywhere close
but
to the stadium now.
the cars, like, it's amazing when they did like the aerial shots. The cars were parked like right next to the stadium. Like, you want to talk about one-stop shopping? Like, boom,
Right.
you're in. Now that's nowhere near, right? So it's you couldn't remake this movie. You couldn't do it, right? The inside of the Joy Center looks different. The stadium looks different. Campus looks different. You couldn't do it. So can't remake it at all.
I
Don't even think
completely
about
agree.
it.
I completely agree. Because, like, I mean, everything would be CGI if you tried to make it.
And that wouldn't be the same. Like, that wouldn't be, I don't know. It just wouldn't be good enough.
And that first, when they show him, remember when he's outside the stadium and they start off and they're like really zoomed in on him. He tried to get in, he couldn't get in, and then the camera starts pulling back away.
Yes.
And you see that divide where he's walking outside the stadium and like inside, and it's like that's all. One, that was like my first real relationship to, sort of, again, having never been here at that point, just like any kind of realization of, what the stadium looked like to, to the campus and the whole thing. And like you pan to the left, like he's walking under what is now the press box there at Notre Dame.
Because he's right up next to the stadium.
Box. Yeah. And everything outside it, what used to be the road there is, just sidewalk and right into, to the Joyce Center.
Well, like, you had the scene where he meets Fortune for the first time. They're literally yelling across the stadium from one tunnel to the other. Like,
right.
How the heck are you going to do that? There's so many different things that you wouldn't be able to do. Yeah. And it just wouldn't have that authentic feel anymore.
Concur. Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go. Rapid fire. We did over an hour on that part of the show. This is great. Let's do some rapid fire now. I love it.
All right. So Bill Bender from the Sporting News ranks Notre Dame as the number 8 team in the nation of the college football playoff era. Here's the point system that he used to do the ranking. You got 10 points if you won a national championship, 5 points for being in the college football playoff, 2 points for being in a New Year's Six bowl. Then they ranked 16 through 1 AP style. So you got points for that, winning percentage. Same deal for consensus All-Americans. They rank 16 through 1. NFL draft picks 16 through 1. And then 1 point if you got a Heisman Trophy winner, which I think is a little bit low.
I was going to say that's honestly a little low for a Heisman Trophy winner, but that's how Oklahoma
doesn't affect Notre Dame, but it's a little bit low.
Yeah.
So here's part of what he says about Notre Dame. Notre Dame belongs in the top 10 on the strength of multiple playoff appearances, 6 seasons with double-digit wins. Irish finished 4-8 in 2016, but they are 63-13 over the last 6 seasons. Only schools with better records are Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson. Irish have slipped out of the top 10 in NFL draft picks since 2014, and Marcus Freeman led the team to 9 wins in 2022. Notre Dame marks the end of the second tier of schools on the list. There is another drop before we reach number 9. That's from Bill Bender. And Alabama's number 1. They scored 162 points. Clemson 120.5. Ohio State 108. Georgia 98.5, which really, like, their dominance has only come on in the last few years, really.
But that's like the top 4. And then there's a drop off.
Right. And then it goes from 98.5 at number 4 down to Oklahoma at number 5, 59.5. LSU 56.5. Michigan 48.5, Notre Dame 45.5, and now you've got another big drop to number 10 from Notre Dame at 45.5 to Oregon at 21, then Wisconsin, Florida, and Penn State. So what do you think about where Notre Dame ended up in all this? Is anything else that jumps out at you?
So I agree that they are a tier 2 team. I mean, you can't, unless you like put on multiple rose-colored glasses, like you can't put them in tier 1. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? But I think they do belong in tier 2. But I do think the order of tier 2 is negotiable. That's what I'll say. But I think they belong.
Well, it's not negotiable based on the point system that he came up with.
Right. It's painful to see Oklahoma, LSU, and Michigan ahead of Notre Dame. Okay.
If you take out LSU winning a national championship, like they've cranked out some NFL talent, but you take out that national championship and they're just barely ahead of Notre Dame that
that's true,
because they've only had the one playoff appearance so far. And obviously what boosts Notre Dame is multiple playoff appearances. I would say, like, I'm not sure, like, if I'm going to look at his list of criteria, I get most of them. But again, like, shouldn't you get more than 1 point for having a Heisman Trophy winner if you're giving, multiple points for having consensus All-Americans, which Notre Dame has had a few of, but
which is what helps them get their number up there.
Yeah, like the NFL draft picks, I get it. It's like if you have elite talent, they end up getting drafted, they turn into draft picks and that kind of thing. But at the same time, I'm not sure what having NFL draft picks really has to do with who you are as, in the college football
as a
playoff
program.
Because
right.
Yeah, you can be a good to a very good player and, on a great team and not play in the NFL.
Sure.
So
that's
like,
true.
I'm not sure why that's a criteria in this. That would be like, if I'm going to look at, his data points and what, that would be the biggest thing for me. There should be more points for winning a Heisman. I don't know that having guys drafted into the NFL should be, a factor in this.
I do like the fact that they do take into account All-Americans, though. I do like that because All-Americans and NFL draft picks aren't exactly the same. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times to make All-American, you've got to be on a pretty decent team, right? And it's not necessarily the case for NFL draft picks. Sometimes it is. Like, if you happen to play for the Georgia defense, then that will get you drafted, obviously. So, look, I think Notre Dame is in the right tier. Again, I would argue but you can't argue the numbers. You can just argue the way that they put the numbers together. But they're a tier 2 team. They are, and that's where they belong. And so I would say of all of the ridiculous ranking systems and things that people have come up with, I would say that this is probably one of the more accurate ones. Right. If you're ranking programs.
Like Patrick says, we beat LSU several times. Okay, well, that's true. But LSU has won a national championship and Notre Dame hasn't. And exactly. This is the top teams of the college football playoff era. The goal of, the first goal is get to the playoff. Second goal is win the national championship. And like it or not, LSU's won a national championship much more recently than Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
But I think we're, again, like to the talent and the development and all that kind of stuff, I think where Notre Dame has been and the lack of overall draft picks really speaks to the fact that the program, has won a lot of games despite having the, truly elite guys that Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia have. And that is tier 1. Those 4 teams, those are the 4 teams winning the national championships, with the exception of LSU, that one-off that they had. But, then again, like, you want to get better over the next 10 years. Well, you just keep recruiting more guys. You're going to have more guys that end up being draft picks and that whole thing. And, that's essentially what it comes down to. Just keep recruiting better.
Absolutely.
You do that, you're going to be more competitive in these games. You're going to start winning these games.
There's a lot of draft picks on Notre Dame's roster right now. I will say that. So
we'll get to the Pat Fitzgerald stuff here in just a second, because I see there's a lot of talk going on about it in the chat right now. But there are 47 days to go until Notre Dame and Navy open the season. Jason Onye wears number 47. A lot of people might not have known that because
it's such a weird number for a defensive tackle.
I know. I haven't seen much of him the last couple of years. But Jason and Justin Adamalola each had 3 sacks last season. Do you buy or sell Jason Onye topping that number this season?
I actually buy it. I think that he is going to be a breakout player. I think he's going to be more of a disruptive player than the Twins were. I just think he's going to have a chance to get in the backfield. And the only hesitation I have is that he feels like this year's version of Riley Mills last year. And Riley Mills didn't live up to the billing. He had a good year. He didn't have a great year, right? People were calling, saying he was going to have this huge breakout year. Didn't have that. But I think Jason Onye, I think the light bulb has gone on for him. I think because he was kind of a big ball of clay when he got to Notre Dame, and it was going to take some time in the weight room and from a technical standpoint, all of those things have kind of all gotten to this point I think he surpasses it. I'm going to say he goes over the 3.
I do too. And, like I think that he could even come close to, like their combined production of 6 sacks. I'm not, come close to. I mean, you make a good point about Riley Mills. I think the difference that I like just watching a little bit of Jason Onye in the spring is because of the fact that he is a little longer, but he is also really strong. And he, started off as a defensive end. He reminds you a little bit of, like Jerry Tillery, just, and I'm not trying to say he's going to be Jerry Tillery. So don't let's not, I'm just saying from the body and the strength and the fact that he does have pass rush type skills, a guy with pass rush type skills moving inside and can also be disruptive in there. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think he'll get at least 3 sacks, if not more, this season.
Yeah, he's going to have a big year. And I think a lot of that has to do with the linebackers getting better this year, with, some of the other talent that's on the defensive line. I just think he's going to have an opportunity to benefit not only from his own talent, but from the talent around him.
Right. So the breaking news that has happened just within the last few minutes here, Pat Fitzgerald fired at Northwestern days after details surfaced alleging graphic instances of hazing within the program, according to multiple reports. They were initially going to just suspend him without pay for 2 weeks. They have made the move to fire him. The Daily Northwestern student newspaper is the outlet that broke this story. So, according to multiple reports, Pat Fitzgerald is out. What do you think, Vince?
Based on everything that I've read and the information that I have at my fingertips right now, obviously Northwestern has more information than you and I do. Let's just be obvious about that, right? But this day and age, if there's even a hint of impropriety, you're not gonna save your job. Like, that's just not going to happen. Whether he knew about it or not, he's the easy scapegoat at Northwestern. Now, I will say that if he didn't know about it, that's almost as big of a problem.
Like, it speaks even more. Yeah,
exactly. Like, I feel like he knew about it, because I don't know how he couldn't know about it. He's been coaching there since 2006. You're telling me that things happen in that program that he doesn't know about? I got a hard time with that. I really do.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, seemed longer than 2006, but you're right. I mean, but that is 17 years. He's been there for a long time. And there are multiple players since this report has come out, multiple former players coming out and saying he absolutely knew about it, and they're talking about all this. And you just, I think you're absolutely right. If he did know about it, you can't let that kind of stuff happen. If he didn't know about it, and this kind of stuff is as widespread as they're saying, it speaks even worse of you.
Yeah,
I think. And it's just, I thought hazing was out a long time ago. It's one thing to make the freshmen carry a little bit of extra equipment and stuff like that. But
I don't have a problem with that.
To do this, I don't either. But to do the stuff that they're talking about having these guys do, and like, you see people who've been trying to defend him on Twitter, there's like, well, that's not the Pat Fitzgerald I know. Are you really going to tell me that you don't know somebody who's been one person, when their public persona, and there's somebody completely different when the doors are closed? Right. I mean, come on. And so it's a shame, but
it is. You
can't, that kind of stuff can't happen today.
Yep. Completely agree. And like I said, even if he didn't know about it, he's his job. He's the leader. You're the leader. You're the guy in charge. And if this stuff happens on your watch, then you got to take the fall, man. Like, I don't have an issue with that.
Patrick says football coaches are too controlling to have him not know.
Exactly.
And that's exactly right. And, supposedly there was kind of a coded little, like he would do something, and, that like was kind of a signal
over the head or something. I don't know. Yeah, but exactly. There's no way. There's no way. I'm sorry. There's no way.
Yeah. All right, so fill in the blank. Cincinnati Reds rookie Ellie De La Cruz stealing second, third, and home in succession against Milwaukee this weekend was blank.
Terrible baseball played by the Milwaukee Brewers. I watched the replay because obviously I'm not watching Reds Brewers games, right? So I watched the replay. Legitimate steal of second. Beat the throw. Great job, right? Then there's another pitch. Then on the next pitch, he steals third. The reason he steals third is because the third baseman is playing where the shortstop plays. It's like the mini shift because they can't, you got to have two guys on either side of the base, and I get that. But they basically have a shift on. There's no way that the third baseman can even get there. So there's not even a throw to third. I mean, look, great heads up play by De La Cruz. Don't get me wrong. But they basically gave him third base. They gave him third base because they're not even covering. Like the third baseman didn't even move. He didn't even take one step towards third base when De La Cruz took off for third. I mean, bad. And then the pitcher takes the ball, turns his back, and just starts walking back to the mound. And De La Cruz is already halfway off of third base because they're not holding him on because the third baseman's still playing shortstop.
Right.
And so he turns his back.
He takes off.
He only had 45 feet to go.
It was a little league steal of home. Like
it was embarrassing is what it was. Like total laziness on the part of the Brewers.
He stole 3 bases on 2 pitches.
Yeah.
Just 3 bases on 2 pitches.
Look, again, it's a heads up play by De La Cruz. I give him all the credit in the world, but it was pure laziness and analytics that got the Brewers into this mess in the first place.
Right. That's exactly right. Like teams are getting away from analytics and just what you said, analytics stuck him where, it's like a third baseman who doesn't know how to think for himself because somebody's told him, well, you got to stand 15 feet away from third base. And he never even thought about going over there. Once a guy just stole third base to try to cover. And then, like I say, he steals 3 bases on 2 pitches.
He was halfway off of third base when the pitcher got the ball returned to him from the catcher.
Jesse did something like that in middle school. Like he didn't steal the first 2 bases, but he was at third base and he's like, and I was coaching, like third base. And he goes, can I go here if I get, my spot? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so same thing, he starts leading off third, the pitcher throws a pitch, catcher throws it back to him. Pitcher turns his back and starts walking, back across the mound. Jesse takes off for home and just steals home. It's like, it's basically, a little bit different, but that's essentially
pretty much the same thing.
Take advantage of guys who weren't paying attention. It was beautiful. I mean, like this guy has obviously burst onto the scene and he is just a great athlete. Like every time he steps to the plate or he's out there on the field, he's just doing something, flashing that athleticism that he's got. Did you
see that, man? When they were playing the Nationals, I don't know if it was this recently or not, but they
tried to check the bat stuff.
Yeah. Was that recently? I just saw the video today.
Week. It was last week. Yeah.
They're checking because he like ground out the nozzle or the end of the bat or whatever, which I don't see how that helps you in any way. It's not like it was court. They zoomed in on it and he just like kind of filed it down or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, okay, fine. I won't use this bat. Boom. Second deck shot. Like,
right.
And then he turns around. Did you see what he did? He turns around. He points at the bottom of the bat. Oh, it was fan. It was great. It was perfect. I loved it.
I know.
It was great.
Kind of guy that everyone wishes they had on their team. Pretty much.
Seriously. Yeah. No doubt.
Fill in the blank. The Major League Baseball draft started last night, and it's blank. They held the draft inside the Seattle Seahawks Lumen Field.
They are really trying to turn the MLB draft into like the NBA or the NFL draft, which is never going to happen because the baseball draft is way too long.
Just not
way
the same
too long.
Yeah.
I had no idea that was the case, by the way, because I've always, when the draft rolls around, first of all, it's in the middle of the season, which is a terrible timing for the draft. And
but
I realize why they do it.
Because it used to be in June, like right before, like for a while it was like right before super regionals, and then like it was during super regionals, and then it was right before the College World Series. They finally I kind of like them making it part of All-Star Weekend, personally.
Yeah. I mean, you might as well, because I know why they have to do it now, so that they get these guys into rookie ball and they get to play the fall league and they get to do all that stuff. So you can't really do it in the off season because you can't have these college guys waiting around and so I understand why they have to do it in the middle of their season, which no other sport has to do. But it's so stinking long that I always just look at the recap. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not watching the draft live for baseball
because they're not
long.
They're not like NBA or NFL
where
guys,
they're going to make an instant impact.
First round, like where you don't know most of their names.
Absolutely.
They're either high school guys and not enough. Like if you're if you're a fan of the SEC, obviously Paul Skeens and Cruz, the guys from LSU who went 1 and 2 in the draft last night. Like everybody from the SEC knows them. Or if you watched a little bit of the College World Series, you know them. But otherwise, there's just not a lot of name factor like you have in the first round of the NFL where everyone's talking about it, or the NBA with Wembanyama and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and the NBA has a little bit of what you're talking about because when they get to these overseas guys and stuff like that. But the other problem with Major League Baseball is that when these guys get drafted in the first round, you're not going to see them play for your team for years most of the time, like multiple years. So that instant gratification that everybody's looking for doesn't exist.
Not nearly the same as the NBA or the NFL.
Right. They'll sweep them up, and they'll for the Cubs, for example, they'll sweep up the guy that they drafted 13th or whatever, and they'll take him to Wrigley Field. They'll put a jersey on him. They'll do a photo shoot, and then they send them to Florida for rookie ball. Like, you're never going to hear from them for 3 years.
I just thought it was odd, though. Like, when coverage of the draft started, they're doing an aerial, and they're showing the top of the Seattle Seahawks football stadium, and it is filled with MLB draft. Like the football field is covered with, like draft stage, and you've got ESPN set up and MLB. But it's inside the football stadium. Why are you doing it inside the football stadium? You've got the place where the baseball team plays. Even if you're not going to do it inside, because I don't know if they were. I mean, they could have been practicing
or something.
I don't know. Yesterday. Like, why are you doing it inside the football stadium? I don't
figure out a team. Figure out a baseball team that's on the road and do it in their stadium, because not only are they on the road, but they're going to be on the road, and then there's the All-Star break.
Again,
plenty of time to set up and tear down.
If you want to do it at the same place that the All-Star game is taking place, I get it, but why not just do it like right outside the baseball park if you don't want to do it inside? I just thought it was very odd that you're doing the Major League Baseball draft inside an NFL team's stadium.
Agreed.
So, like what?
It's like they're mooching off Big Brother.
What purpose did that serve? Home Run Derby is tonight. Or actually, before the Home Run Derby, we are at the All-Star break. The Home Run Derby is tonight, but All-Star break. Cubs great Fergie Jenkins says they should bring back the old timers game during the All-Star break. Do you buy or sell that?
Well, now that all the guys that I watched growing up and watched when I was younger that are my age aren't playing anymore, yes, bring back the old timers game, because I want to see those guys play some more. Yes, 100%. 20 years ago, I might have said, I don't give a crap about the old timers game. Now it's going to be all the guys that I grew up loving to watch. And so I want to watch them again.
My thoughts exactly. Like that's because, like they do this, like the futures game and all that stuff. Nobody knows who the futures guys are. Who the old timers are. Now, might be some guys who, struggle a little bit to actually play baseball, but you're exactly right. Like there you put, like, let the young people of today kind of get to see some of these guys. Maybe they never got to see, or they got to see, several years ago. I would definitely be for that. I think it would be a really good idea. And going back to what we were just talking about with the draft, Patrick says, do it at the Field of Dreams. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. Do the Major League Baseball draft out there in the middle of the cornfields of Iowa, doing it Field of Dreams. I don't know if Vince is gone or if I'm gone Are you still there, Vince? So Vince just texted me saying that his computer is restarting. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you, though, for the super chat. Maltavius, he said, did Rudy's brother shack up with his ex-girlfriend? In the movie, he did anyway. I don't know that that happened in real life, but definitely in the movie. All right, so that's going to do it for tonight's show. Vince's computer reached its limit there at the end, and it did a reboot. And so it could be a little bit, so we're not going to wait for him to come back in because we were right at the end anyway. Thanks for being here tonight. Hit the like button on your way out, and we will be back tomorrow. Oh, there he is.
No idea what just happened.
You got back quicker than I thought you would.
Me too. I don't know what happened, but here I am. So all of a sudden my computer just went blank. I have no idea what just happened. Did you pick your home run derby champ?
I did not. Go ahead. Who you got tonight? Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso is the favorite.
He's going for a three-peat, man. Like,
yeah,
that's gonna be tough. Like going for a three-peat is gonna be really, really hard. I just don't know that that's even realistic. I mean, so I'm gonna take Vlad Guerrero Jr., the young guy.
Okay.
It's all about stamina, and so I'm gonna take Vlad.
I'm just gonna go with Pete Alonso. He's shown, as you said, that he can do it 2 years in a row. And it seems like, some of these other guys, like you would think that the bigger guy, like endurance might be the thing. But it seems like for these smaller guys, endurance has kind of become the thing. And big old Pete Alonso has figured out how to do it. So I'll ride with Pete Alonso. He's one of 3 guys in this contest tonight that has 26 home runs going in. Mookie Betts is another, but he has some of the worst odds going in. Adley Rutschman, the Baltimore Orioles rookie, his dad is going to be pitching to him tonight.
Oh,
so that's going to be pretty cool.
I do think that like the storylines about who's pitching and like those are some fun storylines during the All-Star break. I dig that kind of stuff.
Right, like when Chuck Ristano pitched to Trey Mancini a few years back. Notre Dame pitching, former Notre Dame pitching coach. Yep. All right, well, you got back just in time to wrap things up. So we will talk to you tomorrow. Hit the like button, subscribe, rate, review, and we will talk to you then on IB Nation Sports Talk.